Assalamu alaikum, Feliz Messiah, Messiah. Good morning, peace be with you in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today and to share with you some of the good news that God is working and doing around the world. And it is especially gratifying for me to be here and to stand in front of you and see this wonderful hall of flags and to see my beloved Sudanese flag hanging among that. It just amazes me. It is the flag over here on your left. By the North Korean flag, it's two to the left. It's the one with the green triangle, the black, white, and red stripes. And so I thank you for having that flag. As reported in your bulletin, my wife and I have served in Sudan for 12 years as mission co-workers. My wife taught at Nile Theological College. She taught theological classes. Nile Theological College is a seminary. At that time, in 1995, it was the only Christian school of higher education in Sudan. Sudan is a fundamentalist Islamic country under Sharia law, and it was the only Christian school that was in the city of Kahartoum, and it was authorized and sort of tangibly accepted by the government. I worked as the regional liaison for the Presbyterian Church USA and as a development and finance officer for the two Presbyterian churches in Sudan, the Presbyterian Church of Sudan and Evangelical Presbyterian Church of Sudan. In 2007, in October 2007, my wife and I returned back to the United States for my parents who were ailing and aging, and we felt God calling us back to be with them. And when I came back to the United States, I started to work for an organization called the Medical Benevolence Foundation. The Medical Benevolence Foundation is an organization that is what is considered a validated mission support group of the Presbyterian Church USA. And basically what we do is we support all the medical mission work of the PCUSA and our international partners, including the medical missionaries that are sent out. Now, I'm not an ordained pastor. That's my wife's position. And I always thought having one pastor in a family was enough. I do, however, love to tell stories. And that was great because in Sudan, this church lives on stories. They're an oral culture. So today, if you don't mind, I would like to share with you some of the lessons I have learned while working in a portion of God's vineyard called Sudan. When we first went, Sudan was in fact still a country that was involved in the midst of a civil war. The Civil War had been going on since the day of its independence in 1952. There was a period of 10 years of peace when they had come to a peace agreement, but that was quickly shattered when both sides decided they didn't trust each other anymore, and they continued fighting. Because of this fighting, the country had suffered terribly, and especially in southern Sudan, where the infrastructure was completely destroyed. There was no roads, no schools, no hospitals, no electricity, no water, and over 15 million people lived in this kind of a situation. They lived in a situation where it was common for them to have their whole villages destroyed and burned by the marauding armies, of seeing their family members and other loved ones die from the effects of the war or disease, to have their young children, their young girls, and their young daughters raped and murdered, or stolen and never to be seen again. This was a country that we were going into that was totally strange to us. And when we started to first get to know the people, we constantly wondered, how could they survive in a situation like this? How could they possibly live and exist? And yet we were constantly amazed by their faith, their joy-filled spirit that truly believed that God would see them through anything they faced. Their graciousness and hospitality and their willingness to share everything they had with us, when in most cases they did not have enough to feed their own families, was a constant reminder of us of God's generous love for us all. I remember one time when my wife and I were down in an area of southern Sudan. The fighting had just come through and the villages around had been burned, and you could still see some of the bodies laying in the field. There was still smoke raising in the area. And when we arrived in the area, the community gathered together to come and welcome us. They were so happy to see us. And we were treated at the pastor's house, and we were sitting on the floor eating. It's a common plate. And they brought out beef and chicken and fish and rice and soup. And they laid it out before us. And Betsy and I both knew that this was and had to be a collection from the whole community because in the fighting they kill the animals, they destroy the crops, they had nothing. And I looked at Betsy and I said to her, Betsy, I can't eat this. I can't do this. We're taking mouths out of these people. We're taking food out of these people's mouths, and we're going to be leaving, going back to Khartoum and being able to get our own food. And for a couple of days, I can go without eating if it means saving food for these people. And the pastor who I was staying with, he heard this conversation and he understood English. And he looked at me and he said, Elder Barry, you have to understand, it is our culture that you are our guest, and we have to share with you. And if you do not accept our hospitality, then you cannot be our brother and sister. And I said to him, but I want to be your brother and sister, but this is your food to survive on. And he said to us, but God told us to feed those who come to see us and give them and share with them. And he said, you are in my house. You have to accept my hospitality. I learned a lot that day about what it means to be willing to give and to sacrifice.